Piece number 3 is the first of 2 extracts from Bach's Violin Partita in B minor, and this is the third movement, the Courante, which is a type of Baroque dance in a 3/4 meter. Bach lived during the Baroque period, and part of the traits of that style was a real interest in harmony and what we call functional harmony, which is to do with cadences and particular chord progression movements, which we'll explore and are explained more in the book as well, which have become part of all styles of music, from pop to jazz to classical, but really started in this era with the development of instruments that could play in all 12 keys, which then suddenly opened up the possibility to have one piece of music which could go between different keys. And Bach's music is always exploiting those kind of things. So the main thing that we need to get to grips with to understand how he's writing this music is the perfect cadence, which is an absolute cornerstone of all of Western music of any genre. And that is the chord progression going from the 5th chord in a key back to the 1st chord. So for example, if we were in C major, then I'd count up 5 notes from C in the C major scale, C, D, E, F and G, and then play the chord that's on G. So G major, or to make it even stronger we can go to G7, and then resolve that back to C. And that sense of tension and resolution is what we're building so much of music on, and toying with whether we give that resolution or go kind of take a left turn and delay that resolution is really what the music is using to keep its sense of tension and excitement moving throughout the whole piece. So a couple of examples of these that are given in the book. These can work in either major or minor keys. So if we were in a major key, we might be in the key of E major, and we count up from E, F sharp, G sharp, A, up to B. We play a B or a B7, and then resolve to E. So we can figure these out in any any key, and learn to recognise them in pieces. Hugely important, as I said, to jazz, particularly kind of earlier jazz, lots of 5/1 progressions and 2/5/1 progressions, which brings us on to the second element that I want to talk about, which is secondary dominants. They appear a lot in Bach's music and are really a development and a recycling of the perfect cadence, because the perfect cadence has such a strong sense of resolution that's so satisfying and recognisable to the listener. We can actually kind of chain these together even if we're not going to the 1 chord of the key. We can count up 5 notes from any chord and put a dominant chord, a major chord or a 7th chord 5 steps up from whichever chord we like, and it's going to push us towards that chord. And these are known as secondary dominants. So for example, if we wanted to go from 5 to 1 in the key of C, so we go from G to C, we could prep that G by counting up another 5 from that. G, A, B, C to D, and we get a D7 to G7 to C. And that kind of chain reaction of perfect cadences means that by the time we get to C, it's feeling like we've rolled down this even bigger hill where we've come to rest. And it's got a very satisfying sense of coming to rest that audiences instinctively know how to recognise. The last thing I'd say about secondary dominance is identifying these kind of perfect cadences is a great way to figure out how Bach is changing from one key to another. Although this whole Violin Partita is called in B minor, and it's obviously mostly based around the key of B minor, he's visiting lots of related keys of, for example, going to the closest related chord one way around the cycle of fifths and one way around the other way around the cycle of fifths. So you'd be going from the key of B minor to the 2 related keys, which would be the key of E minor and the key of F sharp minor, which are kind of either way around the circle of fifths, one stop. And the best way to identify moments when he's doing this is to look for dominant 7th chords. If you see one of those, chances are it's going to be followed by a chord a 5th below it, and that's going to be the new key or tonic centre So that brings us on to the first example, example 3A, to help with learning this piece. And this is talking about visualizing chord progressions. It's a great thing to work on. As guitarists, we want to have a good map of the fretboard inside our head to be able to recognize chord shapes, arpeggio shapes, scales. It's going to help with memorizing pieces, and also things like improvising, where we're trying to create melodies on the spot that articulate a certain chord progression in classical, in jazz, in blues, in rock, in any style. This first example, I've played a rhythm guitar part outlining the basic and hopefully relatively familiar bar chord shapes that the melody, in the way that I've arranged it on the guitar, is then spelling out one note at a time. Now, secondly, here's a quick technical note. This piece isn't quite as athletic as some of the others, like mainly the Chopin pieces, but we do need to think about our picking attack to get a nice, smooth, even, and relaxed way of crossing the strings, because there's a lot of one note per string playing here. The violin is tuned in fifths rather than fourths, and is a much shorter scale length, and that means wide intervals are much closer together, much more easily playable on a violin than a guitar. So playing violin music on guitar usually means that we're going to have to do a fair bit of jumping around. Because it's not the fastest of pieces, I've opted for a directional picking approach rather than sweep picking or alternate picking. My approach is to use single strokes for each note, but pick in the direction of the next note that I need to get. So I'll demonstrate that in this next example, but basically it can take a little bit of planning ahead. Feel free to write the pick strokes that you want to use onto the music. I've added some in places where it might be a little tricky to work out or ambiguous, but in general we want to work out when the next string change is coming, we want to be picking towards that string. Check it out in example 3B.